I didn't fall. I slipped on my own rug, the one I refused to throw away because it remembers my husband's shoes. My daughter, Elena, arrived with a casserole and a checklist, and I could tell the checklist mattered more. She clicked her tongue at the bruise on my hip as if it had personally insulted her calendar. "Mom, you need supervision," she said, tasting the word like medicine she wanted me to swallow. I let her fuss because sometimes you must let a storm pass to see what it uproots. By afternoon, she had fresh sheets on my bed, a pill organizer on the dresser, and a new lock on my door. "It's just for tonight," she promised, holding the key like a priest holds a relic. "Doctor's orders," she added, which I knew was not true. My doctor trusts me more than she trusts herself. The lock clicked. The house went quiet, listening for what I would do next. When you are old, people mistake your patience for weakness. I prefer to call it strategy. I checked the window latch I never let the handyman replace, and the vent that carries voices from the hall. I sat on the quilt I sewed in 1984 and waited for the truth to talk. I heard her on the phone. Her voice gets bright when she lies. "Yes, Mr. Cohen, my mother is confused. Yes, about finances too," she said, feeding him a story with stainless steel spoons. Power of attorney, emergency guardianship, expedited evaluation. She arranged my future like furniture I hadn't ordered. She called my fall an episode, my neat pantry hoarding, my questions agitation. Then she asked about transferring titles in anticipation of care. I pressed 2 fingers to my pulse and counted to 10 until the anger turned into air. My room smelled like lavender and old paper, the smell of women who survive. I opened the cedar box under the bed, the one Elena never bothers to lift because it is inconvenient. Inside, my marriage certificate, the deed we paid with summers of overtime, a letter from my husband that always finds me when I'm lost. Beneath the letter was my old flip phone, the emergency one my sister insisted I keep when she moved to Florida. I turned it on and watched the tiny screen glow like a match in a cave. If Elena wanted a performance, I would give her one, on my stage at my pace. Night deepens houses. It also thins them. Through the vent, I heard Elena rehearse compassion for an audience of one. Herself. "She'll thank me later," she whispered, the anthem of people who take without asking. She opened drawers in the hallway, the ones where I used to keep birthday cards and spare keys. "Keys are for people who knock. Elena prefers locks." She texted my son, Daniel. "Mom's not safe alone. Don't worry, I'm handling it." Daniel works 2 jobs and 2 lives, husband and son, and he always chooses the emergency in front of him. I don't blame him. Life trains men to see fires and miss smoke. I texted him from the old phone. "I'm okay. Call me tomorrow. Don't sign anything tonight." Then I messaged my neighbor, Grace, a retired nurse who believes in God and photocopies. "Grace, love, I might need you early. Bring your calm and your binder." She replied with a thumbs up and a prayer hands, which together mean action. I took inventory like a captain in a storm. 2 bottles of water, crackers, a sweater, a stubborn hinge, and 30 memories of being underestimated. Fear tried to sell me a story. I declined. I unpinned the safety pin inside the curtain hem. My habit, my just in case, my little rebellion. It fit the screw on the interior latch plate because I have always trusted my future to small tools. Slowly, carefully, I loosened what I could without waking the house. A woman who has canned peaches in August can outwait anything. At midnight, Elena laughed at a text I couldn't see and said, "She'll sign in the morning." I smiled to myself. She will not. I slid my husband's letter from its envelope and read the line that saves me every time. When the world shrinks you, open a door. Men leave many things. Mine left sentences that behave like keys. I tucked the letter back and closed my eyes without sleeping. Dawn, I knew, would arrive with coffee, forms, and a theater of concern. Elena entered with a tray, the door left ajar as if generosity could excuse hardware. "Morning, Mama," she sang, syrup over stone. I scheduled the evaluator for this afternoon. Evaluator, such a pretty word for a cage. She set down coffee, toast, and a pen. "There are intake forms," she added, smiling like a billboard. Just signatures, nothing binding. The last time someone said nothing binding, I wore white and meant it. I'll read every line, I said, because I always do. She pressed the pen closer, her nail tapping the spot where control becomes ink. I get tired, I told her, when people confuse love with paperwork. She blinked. For a moment, I saw the girl who used to sit at my table and borrow my pearls. Then the mask returned, the one made of schedules and shiny words. I'm only protecting you, she said, and left to take another call. I used the opening to call Grace. 2 things, I whispered. First, please bring your blood pressure cuff and your clipboard. Second, bring your church friend who notarizes on Tuesdays. Grace chuckled, that quiet nurse's laugh that has seen everything and panics at nothing. We'll be there in 20, she said. Wear your best sweater. Truth deserves ceremony. I hung up and smoothed my hair like a woman claiming her own photograph. The papers Elena had left were thick with kindness and traps. Durable power of attorney. Drafted yesterday. Healthcare proxy. Naming Elena first, Daniel as alternate if available. Transfer on death deeds. To simplify probate. Guardianship petition. Temporary for safety. Every paragraph wore a smile that did not touch its eyes. Grace arrived through the back door the way Grace always does, quietly on time, saving the day without applause. With her came Alma, the church notary, who carries stamps like commandments. I welcomed them in my best sweater and my steadiest voice. Elena frowned. Villains prefer witnesses who nod, not women who take notes. Mom needs rest, Elena said, stepping between me and my friends. I need witnesses, I answered, stepping around her without touching a thing. We began with the oldest test in medicine. Conversation. Grace asked me to recount the morning, the day, the year I married, the name of my first dog. I asked her about her grandchildren because cognition goes both ways and kindness is data. 2. Alma checked my ID, my signature baseline, my understanding of the forms in front of me. Do you understand what these do? She asked. Yes, I said, and that is why I will not sign them. Elena's smile cracked like cheap porcelain. Mother, she whispered, stage soft, don't embarrass yourself. I'm not embarrassed, I said. I'm awake. I took out a folded document from my sweater pocket, last week's appointment summary from my actual doctor, cognitively intact, independent, no evidence of dementia. Grace placed it on the table like a trump card in a gentle game. Alma read it and nodded as if a bell had rung in a courthouse. Since we're gathered, I continued, I have papers of my own. I set down a fresh healthcare proxy I prepared months ago, naming both children jointly, requiring joint consent. A narrow door closed in Elena's eyes. I added a revocation of any prior powers executed under duress and a statement of intent regarding my home. No transfer without my notarized consent and my doctor's co-signature. Alma stamped each with a quiet thunder. I watched the ink dry the way a farmer watches rain. The evaluator arrived smelling like lemon sanitizer and policies. She shook hands with everyone and then with me, as if I were last on a guest list. Elena tried to answer the questions before they were asked. I answered for myself. We discussed clocks, presidents, recipes, and what day my husband used to mow the lawn. The evaluator took notes that looked, from a distance, like surrender. They were not. Do you ever get lost in your own home? She asked. Only when people move my furniture without permission, I said, looking at my daughter and then at the lock. Do you know why I'm here? She continued. To decide if my voice belongs to me, I answered, or to the next person who wants my signature. She held my gaze longer than the job requires. Thank you, she said, which is evaluator code for I heard you. When the tour reached my bedroom, she noticed the interior latch and the new lock plate. Did you install this? She asked Elena. It's for safety, Elena replied too quickly. The evaluator made another note, and then made another kind of note, the one that lives in a file, with consequences. Back in the kitchen, she asked for privacy with me and Grace. Elena protested. Alma coughed a notary's cough, and the rules took my side. Do you feel safe? The evaluator asked softly once the door closed. I feel prepared, I said, and I will not be signing any powers of attorney today. She nodded, closed her folder, and smiled with her actual face this time. I'll send my report, she said, and a recommendation about locks. When she left, the house seemed to exhale for the first time since the rug betrayed me. Some victories do not sound like trumpets, they sound like paper closing. At 4 o'clock, while Elena rearranged her script in the living room, I dialed Mr. Cohen, the very lawyer she'd recruited. Mrs. Reyes? He answered, with a tone men use when they expect confusion and plan to be kind about it. Yes, I said, the principal. I'd like to clarify a few things before anyone drafts anything in my name. I explained the lock, the forms, the evaluator, and my doctor's letter. I told him about the joint proxy already notarized and the revocation for anything hinted at under duress. Silence. Then the sound of a man reversing a car without hitting the mailbox. I was under the impression, he began. You were under my daughter's impression, I corrected gently. Going forward, any consultations about my affairs will include me and my son on speaker. I continued. Of course, he said, professionally chastened. Would you like a new counsel list? Yes, I replied. Please send 3 elder law firms who don't need locks to do their jobs. We ended politely, the way 2 adults do when they agree that sunlight is free. I called Daniel next. Mom, he answered, breathless. Elena said, I know what she said. I cut in, and I know what she didn't. I told him the story with verbs only, no adjectives, because men who are tired deserve clean sentences. He listened all the way to the period at the end. I'm coming over, he said. Nobody locks my mother in her own house. He arrived with flowers he forgot to remove the price tag from, which is how I know love is real. In the hall, he saw the lock and something in his jaw changed. Elena launched into a speech about safety and liability. Daniel raised a hand, not to silence her, but to slow the lie. Keys, he said quietly.
Now.
She placed them on the table like a confession. The lock was gone, but its echo stayed in the air like smoke that refuses to leave. Daniel paced, still young enough to believe anger solves things. Elena, what were you thinking? He demanded, voice low, dangerous in its calm. She folded her arms, choosing arrogance over apology. You don't know what it's like, she said, to watch her decline day after day. Decline? I asked softly. You mean independence. She turned away. You almost fell again this morning, she said. I almost fell. I corrected, because you moved the rug. Daniel looked between us, the silence tightening like a rope. I was helping, Elena muttered. Help doesn't use keys, he said. She didn't answer. The truth had already taken her seat. That night, Daniel stayed on the couch, just in case. I didn't argue. He needed to see the house through my insomnia. Every creak, every draft, every habit of the walls told a story about control. He saw the scratch marks around the doorframe, the fresh paint hiding them badly. He noticed how the medicine cabinet was arranged in pairs, one of mine, one of hers. By dawn, his anger had cooled into something heavier. Understanding. When the morning came, I made coffee and poured 3 cups. I want peace, I told them, but not silence. Elena didn't speak. Her eyes were red from crying or planning. I couldn't tell. Today, I continued. We talked to professionals. Together. Daniel nodded. Agreed. Sometimes justice begins with breakfast. Mr. Cohen returned my call with unexpected warmth. He offered a joint meeting to clarify intentions, lawyer code for clean the mess without headlines. We agreed on noon, his office, neutral ground. Elena dressed in apology colors, soft beige, pearl earrings, a tremor of regret. I wore navy, the color of quartz and storms. Daniel drove, because trust is earned in small, quiet errands. The office smelled of carpet cleaner and caution. Mr. Cohen greeted us, but his assistant's glance said more. Something shifted. We sat. He began. Mrs. Reyes, your daughter acted out of concern, but certain boundaries were crossed. I finished for him. He nodded. We've reviewed the documents. They're null until signed, and they will not be. Elena exhaled relief too quickly, mistaking null for forgiven. There's more, he said, sliding a folder toward me. It contained a statement from the evaluator, neutral tone, sharp edges. Client cognitively intact, understands complex reasoning, demonstrates insight. He cleared his throat. Additionally, due to conflict of interest, my firm will no longer represent Ms. Elena Reyes. Her face froze mid-expression, somewhere between shock and calculation. Daniel looked at me. I looked at the window. Freedom sometimes wears paperwork. Outside, the air smelled like decision. Elena walked ahead, her heels punctuating the sidewalk. I was trying to protect you, she repeated, like a spell losing power. I know, I said. You just forgot from whom. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't have to. In families, silence is often the verdict. Back home, I opened the windows wide enough to let out months of stale fear. The wind rearranged curtains and thoughts alike. Grace stopped by with muffins, because justice should always have sugar. She inspected the doorframe, nodded approval, and hugged me the way nurses do, checking vitals and soul at once. You did good, honey, she said. But keep copies of everything. I pointed to the drawer already labeled in case of future stupidity. Elena stayed upstairs, pretending to pack. I heard drawers opening, closets sighing, the rhythm of guilt disguised as order. By evening, Daniel sat beside me with an old photo album. Remember when she used to braid my hair? He said, smiling sadly. Yes, I answered. That's why this hurts instead of angers. Pain is the luxury of those who still love. After dinner, Elena came down with a suitcase and a question. Do you hate me? She asked. I looked at her the way mothers look at newborns and funerals, tenderly, honestly. I hate what fear does to people, I said. Not the people themselves. She nodded, unable to hold my gaze. She left that night, promising calls she wouldn't make. When the door closed, the house didn't echo this time. It sighed. Daniel turned off the porch light. Are you okay, Mom? He asked. Yes, I said. And tomorrow I'll change the locks. Not to keep anyone out, but to remind myself who owns the keys. He smiled, tired but proud. Outside, even the wind seemed quieter, as if listening to me breathe. A week later, a white envelope arrived, official paper with kind intentions. Inside, the evaluator's final report, thorough and unemotional. No signs of impairment. Recommendation: no guardianship necessary. I placed it in the drawer with the others. Proof, not revenge. Grace read it aloud just to hear justice in print. It's like a hymn, she said. Short but true. Daniel forwarded a copy to the family lawyer we'd chosen together. He added a note. Mom's file is clean. Keep it that way. Elena didn't reply to his messages, though I saw her car once at the corner. Sometimes regret circles the block before parking. I let it. Forgiveness, like grief, doesn't arrive on schedule. At night, I sat by the window with tea and silence. The house no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a witness. I thought about how easily care turns into control, how love without listening becomes ownership. I promised myself I'd never call dependence by its wrong name again. I wrote a new line in my will. No power of attorney shall override my voice while I can still speak it. And I slept like someone who had opened her own door. 3 weeks later, Elena returned. No suitcase this time, just a box of apology muffins and a tremble in her lip. I lost my job, she said, half-whisper. I'm sorry, I answered, because manners cost nothing. She sat at the table, eyes darting between walls and ghosts. I read the report, she said. I didn't know it would go that far. You started a process, I told her. That doesn't stop when you close your mouth. Tears came then, quick and real. I thought you were slipping away, she said. And I panicked. I know, I said. But you tried to cage what you didn't understand. We sat in the kind of silence that builds bridges instead of walls. Even guilt needs somewhere to rest. She asked if she could visit sometimes, not as a guardian, but as a daughter. Yes, I said, but you knock first. She nodded, relieved by the boundaries. Before she left, she placed her old key on the table. I don't deserve it anymore, she said. Maybe not, I answered. But one day, you might earn it back. Months passed like polite guests. The house bloomed again with laughter, Daniel's visits, and Grace's coffee. Elena called weekly, each conversation shorter but warmer. The lawyer confirmed the trust, and we're safe, untouchable. The lock on my door remains, not to keep people out, but as a reminder of what I survived. It gleams in the morning light like a metal no one can take away. Sometimes neighbors ask about the incident. I just smile and say, families forget what doors are for. Because really, we build walls when we're scared and unlock them when we're ready to see again. In the end, justice didn't come with handcuffs or headlines. It came with paper, patience, and the sound of my own voice reclaiming space. And that, I think, is the quietest kind of victory. 2 months after the locks came down, another visitor arrived, clipboard in hand, smile too rehearsed to be casual. She introduced herself as part of a wellness follow-up, though I could see the state letterhead tucked inside her folder. Elena had filed for reconsideration before leaving, a final attempt to prove I needed protection for myself. I served tea before she could start the questions. Hospitality is my first offense, calmness my second. She asked about medications, routines, finances, and memory tests. I answered with recipes, Latin names of herbs, and the date my husband first taught me chess. Her pen slowed, hesitating between sympathy and surprise. "You seem very sharp, Mrs. Reyes," she said at last. "I've been sharpening for months," I replied. She laughed, uneasy, and closed her folder early. When she left, she shook my hand and whispered, "For what it's worth, you don't need us." It was the kindest sentence I'd heard in a year. Elena called that night from a number I didn't recognize. Her voice was smaller, stripped of its ornaments. "Mom, they came to my office today," she said. "They asked questions about guardianship forms." I heard paper shuffling, panic turning pages. "They said I might face a review for misrepresentation," she added, trembling. "Then tell them the truth," I said softly. "It's lighter to carry." She began to cry, the kind of crying that sounds like undoing stitches. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "I know," I said, but harm doesn't wait for intention. We stayed on the phone until the silence felt safe again. When she hung up, I prayed, not for punishment, but for clarity. Clarity always costs less than revenge. A week later, Grace dropped by with groceries and gossip. On the counter, between peaches and good intentions, she slid a folded newspaper. Local section, small column, attorney's assistant under review for elder case misfiling. No names printed, but I knew. Elena's firm had let her go quietly, pending ethics review. Grace looked at me, expecting satisfaction. I offered tea instead. I read the article twice, not out of joy, but disbelief at how small justice looks on paper. It doesn't sing, it sighs. I cut out the clipping and tucked it inside my husband's letter. He once wrote that truth moves slow, but never stops walking. He was right. I felt both proud and tired, emotions that often hold hands. That weekend, Daniel took me to the lake where his father used to fish. He parked the car and said nothing for 5 minutes, the silence heavy with preparation. "Mom," he said finally. I knew she was planning something. He explained that Elena had asked him to sign drafts for efficiency weeks before the lock. He hesitated but didn't stop her. "I thought she just wanted to help," he said, ashamed. "I didn't want to believe she'd hurt you." I took his hand, older skin against younger guilt. "We all betray in small ways," I told him, "but we can also repair in larger ones." He nodded, eyes bright, as the wind wrote ripples on the water. He promised to watch over me, but I shook my head. "Just visit," I said. "Don't guard." Guardianship begins where love forgets to trust. Sometimes forgiveness needs a stage, even if the audience never shows up. I wrote Elena a letter that started 3 times before it found its voice. "Dear daughter," I began, "you built a cage out of worry and called it love." I told her that control disguised as protection is still control. That fear wears many costumes, but truth wears only one, silence. I ended with, When you are ready, the door you locked is still open. I sealed it with wax from the candle she gave me last Christmas. Then I placed it in the mailbox without return address, because not all letters need to come back. The next morning, I felt lighter, as if I'd mailed the ghost of anger itself. Grace saw me smile and said, "Closure looks good on you." She was right. Forgiveness doesn't erase, it rearranges. Life found rhythm again, gentle but firm. Morning tea at 7, walk at 9, laughter at noon when Grace told her nurse jokes. I joined a book club filled with widows who read mystery novels like survival manuals. They called me the lady with the locked door story, and I didn't mind. Each week, I shared a chapter, not of the ordeal, but of resilience. Stories, I learned, heal faster than apologies. Daniel painted my kitchen yellow, saying it made the house look awake. He was right. Sunlight began visiting more often. Even the mail felt kinder. Letters from the evaluator, invitations from the library, no more legal envelopes. I caught myself humming while dusting the bookshelf. Peace isn't loud. It's a quiet room that finally stays unlocked. That, to me, was freedom. One evening, just as the sky traded gold for gray, there was a knock on my door. Elena stood there, older by years she hadn't lived yet. She held no papers this time, only a small plant in a cracked pot. "It's rosemary," she said, "for remembrance." We stood awkwardly between past and present. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Just to talk." I let her. The house didn't resist. She looked around, touching walls that once held her guilt. "I read your letter," she said quietly. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "Then start with effort," I replied. We sat, drank tea, and let silence do most of the talking. For the first time in a year, she called me Mom again. Months later, I found something on my doorstep, a small envelope with no name. Inside, a key. My old key. I recognized the chain. Elena's. Attached was a note. "For when you want me to visit again. Love, E." I held it for a long while, the metal warm from the sun. Then I hung it on the hook by the door, not as an invitation, but as a memory of balance. The lock still gleams, but now it guards peace, not fear. The papers are filed, the scars are soft, and the house hums a quieter tune. Sometimes I still listen through the vent, not for danger, but for the simple comfort of my own breath. If anyone asks what happened, I tell them the truth. My daughter locked me in once, and that's how I found the way out. Because every cage, when you understand it, becomes a door.